from West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Support for the Legislature Today is provided by
West Virginia University, a land-grant, space grant, R1 research institution. Learn more at wvu.edu.
Good evening from the Capitol Building in Charleston. I'm Suzanne Higgins. Tonight, a conversation with House Finance leadership about the budget bill they passed out yesterday, a budget with some key differences in spending priorities than that of the Senate. We'll have a conversation with the House Finance Vice Chair and Minority Chair later in the program. But first, reporter Emily Allen joins me. Thanks for being here, Emily.
Thank you.
One of those key differences in spending is, of course, the foster care bill. And the bill got out of Senate Finance last night, a very different bill than the original House Bill 4092 that came over. It's on third reading with the right to amend in the Senate at this point. Tell us about those differences.
Yeah, so originally House Bill 4092, which I should say has been in the House a long time, went through 3 committees, bipartisan support. It had a fiscal note from the Department of Health and Human Resources, which is in charge of foster care, of $16.9 million. A hefty portion of that was a provision in the original version of the bill that would have increased monthly payments to families per child from $600 a month to $900 a month. Because, something that the legislature and the House of Delegates has heard from families is that, the financial support isn't there. It's not enough. So the Senate version of the bill, which started this week, cut that back. It just had $4.9 million, I think that's the most recent version, give to the DHHR to implement a tiered system of support. Obviously, that doesn't automatically equate to increased direct payments. So this next person you're going to hear from is Delegate Jeffrey Pack, a Republican from Raleigh County. He's vice chair of the Health Committee, and he's a co-sponsor of this bill. He actually testified to the Judiciary Committee Tuesday night when they were considering some of these changes. This is what he had to say about the changes in the bill.
I would suggest that I'm not certain that the product before you, i.e. the strike and insert, necessarily addresses the problem in an effective fashion, and perhaps the House version is not perfect either. In fact, I'm certain that it's not. I would suggest, though, that I do have concerns as to how these problems that have been identified wholly across the state, how those are addressed adequately through the strike and insert.
And of course, you said it was on third reading. We talked to Delegate Pack today. He says that he anticipates or he hopes there will be some compromise because that $4.9 million amount in his mind isn't enough.
And we'll see amendments tomorrow. The Democrats have already
some Democrats
lined
are trying to reinstate that funding. It's a whole thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, over in the House today, another important bill, something else we want to talk about, Senate Bill 793. Now, this has to do with B&O taxes currently paid by certain coal-fired electric power plants.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Technically, it allows the coal-powered plants to update their taxable capacity, the amount that they produce that's taxable because they're not running as much. So obviously, there's an energy-related debate on this. We have an environmental scientist in the House of Delegates, Delegate Evan Hansen, a Democrat from Monongalia County, you're going to hear from next. Also, the person explaining the bill was Delegate Linville from Cabell County. He's going to explain how the bill is supposed to lead to decreased payments for ratepayers. So there's a debate kind of about who this break was actually for. Here's their correspondence now.
Taking steps like this are bucking the free market. The free market has changed. The economics of coal has changed. These newer natural gas-fired power plants generate electricity much cheaper than our coal-fired power plants. Renewables are generating electricity much cheaper than our coal-fired power plants because they have no fuel costs. The sun just has to shine or the wind has to blow, and that's free. So they can generate without any fuel costs. So they're always in the money. The natural gas plants are always in the money, and West Virginia coal-fired power plants are only in the money half the time. So I'm afraid that this legislation, should it pass, won't really impact that, because we are very far along in that story now. We're very far along in that. What it will do is decrease the amount of revenues we have to take care of our priorities by millions of dollars a year. But what it won't do is change the underlying economics that our West Virginia power plants are being subject to.
This is an attempt to keep some of these power plants continuing to operate, okay? If the regulated utility companies were to opt in on this, they have to commit to keep them open through 2025, July 1, 2025. And we've heard in this body a number of times about the total number of jobs that are ascribed to any single particular power plant. We heard a lot about the Pleasance power plant. We heard a lot about the downstream jobs. This is a jobs bill. But more than anything, this is a bill where the consequence of it is that these savings must be passed on to the electric rate consumers for any of these plants that are owned by a regulated electric utility. So there's been a lot of discussion in this body that, oh, you voted for an electric rate increase, or any of those sorts of things, or that they just filed for an electric rate increase. This is your opportunity to vote for an electric rate decrease.
So that bill passed.
And it's a sampling of the back and forth that we've heard a lot throughout this session.
And there was the solar bill yesterday. They said that would lead to increased payments for ratepayers. So it's really been this whole energy-related conversation.
All right, and both chambers are back in this evening, and long days to come the last 2 days. Thank you so much, Emily. The Senate has received the House's version of the budget bill, and members of both chambers are predicting a showdown over some of the key differences. Those include the House's $16 million spending increase for the foster care, which we just discussed. The Senate also wanted $7 million for a new intermediate courts appeals court, and almost $3 million for judicial pay raises, which are not part of the budget bill the House sent over. All of this will have to be resolved. Earlier today, we spoke with the House Finance Vice Chair, Vernon Criss, and Finance Minority Chair, Mick Bates, about their bill and the negotiations to come with the Senate. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out of a very busy day for a few minutes to talk to us about what you sent over to the Senate yesterday. But before we talk about the House version of the budget, let's first talk about today, these morning sessions. Both chambers are still voting on bills that have a fiscal note, that have a fiscal impact, and like what we're going to be talking about, you've sent your bill, your budget bill, over to the Senate. Sure. How does that work, Delegate Criss?
You got to remember that there are 3 separate budget bills that have floated into this operation over the last 50-some days. The governor's original from the state of the state, the Senate's version, and the House version. And at some point here in the next 2 days, they will gel into a compromise of some type, so that then both bodies will have an opportunity to take a look at a compromise situation.
Delegate Bates?
So both bodies pass a budget based upon the legislation that they have passed or anticipate passing. Right. So there are a couple of pieces of legislation, specifically the foster care bill that's in limbo right now, that is built into the House's budget. It's a pretty substantial piece. So that bill needs to be worked out, and that'll be worked out probably through a conference committee. And then it's a matter of reconciling those line items. So to do that, you've really got to have a side by side by side. You've got to be able to line these things up. And there are a lot of places where the Senate budget and the House budget actually do line up. So those issues, they all come off the table. And it really comes down to those individual line items and saying, okay, is there a place where we can meet in the middle? And that's done through, typically through an amendment to an amendment. The last couple of years, historically what we've done is have budget week, where that's been a very open and transparent process, and we actually extend for a couple of days. We come in and we close out sections of the budget. The last 2 years, this hasn't happened.
So are you saying you'd rather it not happen this way, the way it's occurred the last couple of years?
I think that we can do it this way as long as that method continues to be transparent as well. So my concern would be that, we send the House budget across, and decisions are made without input of the full body, and it comes back and we accept the amendment to our amendment, and the deal's done before there's an opportunity to really get down deep enough to see exactly what's there. So, I want to make sure that we do this thoroughly and completely, because there are some disagreements about priorities. So I think a lot of places where we agree, a lot of places where we agree in the House, a lot of places where the House agrees with the Senate, but there are some places where we disagree.
And I want to get into that, and let's just back into the budget that you sent over last night, 95 to 5. 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans voting against, so it was an overwhelming. You, Delegate Bates, voted for the budget. Let's talk about comparing what you've sent over to what the governor presented you.
There were 3 things in our budget that became priority for us as a body. One was the foster care. The other was the IDD waiver that the governor wanted done, and so did we as a House. And then the other one that kind of cropped up at the end was making sure that the Mountaineer Challenge Academy in Montgomery would be funded so that that operation could get open, hopefully within this sometime later in the fiscal year.
That was amended back into the House budget yesterday.
That was amended back in yesterday. So those 3 items were the primary focus of the extraordinary items that we had, would have been over and above the normal process of the budget process.
And so with the governor's budget, in order to achieve those additions, those enhancements that the House wanted, $45 million were cut from the governor's budget. What he proposed.
Yeah, and some of that was actually restored in the back. So there's some of the priorities that the governor has actually been put in the back of the budget for in the surplus sections. He's not going to get all he wanted in his introduced budget, but he's going to get more than what was originally proposed.
Right. As long as the economy continues to, and it appears through February, as far as the daily revenues are concerned, that they're meeting their expectations. We're still lagging behind the July and August. Yeah, the July and August numbers that came in the first part of the fiscal year. So they anticipate thinking that with March numbers and April numbers, that those numbers will come back up. And so as we get through this year's and we have funded the items, what we call in the back of the budget, we anticipate or we're hoping, let's say, that the economy continues to be on the right track, and the items that we put in the back of the budget will be funded in the order that they're put in there.
What is your feeling about the likelihood that those state revenues will continue to be consistent and not lag behind?
I think we have to be concerned about what's happening globally right now too. I mean, this issue with this virus is going to have an economic impact nationally, globally. I mean, so I think we're treading water. I don't think we're going to lose ground. I mean, I think the under is probably about $50 million.
Right, and the other thing is too, we know that at some point this month, there should be some kind of a decision on the pipeline work that's been shut down. And we've idled a lot of pipeline workers because of that, and that there will be a decision made on that, and we understand that these pipeline workers will probably be going back to work sometime this summer, which is a normal pattern for the work that we have done in West Virginia. The pipeline work that has been prior to this, it's normally been June or July before they get here anyway to start work because of the rainy seasons in April and May.
Let's talk about some of the things that did need to be carved or pulled back from the governor's budget. His Jobs and Hope program, that took...
it took us, I think we cut it about half maybe. And that's part of the Jim's Dream things that we had in last year's budget. And there was a couple of the other line items that... But to be able to
the MARC train, I just wanted to insert in here while you talk, the MARC train in the Eastern Panhandle, that commuter train, the Milton flood wall, a couple other projects.
Right. And again, because of the emphasis as a body, that we decided that foster care and IDD waiver were more, needed more opportunity there, then we had to find some place to be able to still do some of these things in these other line items, but not all of it.
Yeah, so those projects, and my understanding, those programs should be able to continue with the allocation that they have. And those that have been around the Jobs and Hope program speak very positively of it and the impact that it is having. So we wanted to ensure there was funding there for that to continue, but it didn't necessarily require the same level of funding for that to occur when there were other funding priorities. I think the biggest disagreement that we have is over this, how we're using all this Medicaid money.
Mm-hmm. This was a major piece of what the governor proposed.
Yes.
He called it the Families First Medicaid Fund.
Yeah, we call it the lockbox.
You've been terming it the lockbox,
Sure.
which is putting money away. Now, when I talked to the two of you at the beginning of this session, you both had question marks about the the validity.
And those questions really
whether it was a prudent thing to do. They haven't been answered yet.
And the legislation didn't run in the House. So
No.
there won't be a lockbox. The money will still be in Medicaid. The surplus will still be there. There's still $309 million that will be in Medicaid. It simply doesn't line item it out into a separate allocation somewhere else. And that's really where there was some divergence and 4 hours worth of discussion last night about, are all the needs in healthcare, all the needs of West Virginia being met right now, and why are we squirreling our money away when we can support effective programming now to be doing things. So that's where our discussion was last night, and there was a disagreement on about 12 amendments that the Democrats offered
Right.
to take portions of that money, not all of it, but to put it to work now.
And our position was that we transferred about
17 million.
17 million
In addition.
And based upon the 6-year plan for Medicaid, is that over the next 5 years, starting in 20 till 2024, that this excess funds that are there are going to be needed for Medicaid. And the 17 that we put in at this point is going to help us get through the year 2024 based on the 6-year plan. So we took a different view and tried to make the dollars last longer in Medicaid, because we're uncertain of where we're going to be as far as the Medicaid program is concerned. Feds have an opportunity to adjust that at any time, and based upon our population and the heavy use of the Medicaid program, we have got to have those dollars available so that we can keep our people healthy.
And again, Delegate Bates, members of your caucus felt that this money would be better used now.
Yeah, well, I mean, and certainly the 6-year plan for Medicaid doesn't look great, nor does the 6-year plan for the state of West Virginia. So, and there are some concerns in the out year, but we disagree with the position that was taken to put $17 million additional money into into Medicaid, when there's already $309 million there, and we don't fund $100,000 for bulletproof vests for troopers. Or $200,000 for
respond to that. Why was that an important and necessary thing to do?
It was a policy decision that as far as the leadership was concerned, that's where we wanted to go.
Who?
The leadership position.
Oh, the leadership. But why 17? I'm just trying
because the number was in the year 2024, the projected deficit was going to be $16 million and some odd dollars. So based upon that projection of deficit in the Medicaid program, that's why we decided that we wanted to move $17 million now, so that at least through the year 2024 we would have the dollars available for Medicaid.
The leadership, Delegate Chris put out a press release right after all of these amendments were proposed yesterday and failed, and basically right down party line. Delegate Chris, it said that the Dems wanted to gut $68 million from the Medicaid program to hurt our most vulnerable, that would hurt our most vulnerable. Do you think that's a fair characteristic of what happened yesterday? Because they were for domestic violence programs and substance use disorder programs and veterans. And
I don't think that represents the body in that statement. And again, what we were trying to do was prevent a deficit position in a mid-year situation down the road that, we don't like to have to be called into special session to advance monies or change monies or take monies from investment situations to cover daily operations of the state. And we were trying to prevent that from happening down the road. But there's always next year. We can always come back, take a look at it again, and hopefully that the future legislatures will be prudent in their spending, and if they need those dollars, they'll be there.
So, I mean, I just, I think quite simply that crossed the line, and that it was a misstatement and truth. And to be fair, that was not released to my friend. Was not. He didn't release that.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, you were not. You were not mentioned in that.
But that really wasn't our intention. Our intention was to put that work today to take care of today's problems, right? As opposed to put $16 million into a fund that's already overfunded for a problem that exists in 2024. So the Medicaid program is $1 billion plus program. It's a rounding error, $17 million. It's really just a question of priorities, and we have different priorities. And I think they came out last night. And some of the reason why I believe there was resistance to incorporating those things is to make sure that the Senate budget and this House budget syncs up as much as possible. So I believe there's been some discussion behind closed doors as to make that happen relatively quickly before we finish on Saturday night.
Now, again, we're recording this in the middle of the afternoon because of your busy schedule. You're going back into session. So I just want to kind of pivot in the few moments that we have left and look at what's to come in the next day or two or three.
A lot more bills.
And so we've got the foster care bill. It looks like it will, at least several amendments will be made over in the Senate today. You've mentioned, Delegate Bates, that you see that going to conferees and worked out. I mean, how?
You would think so.
I do too.
Delegate Chris, how? How adamant are you that this gets put into our final budget?
Oh, at some form or fashion, it will be in the final budget. That's the reasons for conference committees. That's reason that you come up with the word compromise and everybody walks away mad, but you come up with a number that eventually everybody will live with. So it'll be an opportunity for whoever the 3 or 5 members from the House and the 3 or 5 members from the Senate to come together, and they'll hammer this out. They know that. They have to.
People also need to understand these bills don't stand alone. So the other bills have relationships to these. So there are other priorities that the Senate has. We get to take up an intermediate court bill. The Senate has
what
interest
about
in.
that?
And I believe that those bills will be leveraged against each other, and to ultimately secure their passage. That they'll be used as a bargaining chip between the bodies.
In the budget conferee negotiations.
Well, again, there are separate pieces of legislation, but the composition of that committee and how it's ultimately decided will be worked out by the passage of other pieces of legislation. We're going to take up a bill this afternoon that deals with reduction in B&O tax to coal-fired power plants. There's a judicial pay raise that's out there as well. So this is not the foster care thing is not the only thing out there that impacts our budget or is going to be part of the fiscal discussions that go on to try and close this budget by midnight on Saturday.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Delegate Vernon Criss, Vice Chair of the House Finance Committee, Republican, and Delegate Mick Bates, Minority Chair of the House Finance Committee. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Red Cross Day at the Legislature today. Randy Yohe reports that over the past year, Red Cross volunteers helped nearly 3,000 West Virginians impacted by disaster. He met a few of those volunteers at the Capitol today.
Meet Charleston's Roy Grimmett, and out of Parkersburg, the Red Cross vested Chip Pickering. These are 2 of more than 700 West Virginia Red Cross volunteers who work day and night 24/7 in 5 different lines of service.
I don't know if people realize that it's blood, disaster services, international services, service to the armed forces, and training services with CPR and first aid.
We know about floods, we know about blood drives. What many don't realize is that 90% of the disasters that the West Virginia Red Cross covers are house fires, somebody's home, somebody's apartment. I found that Red Cross volunteers respond to home fires with a holistic approach.
Response has everything to do with immediate sheltering, providing the provisions that they will need to be able to get by through the next couple days, and then connecting them with resources to help them put their life back together.
These volunteers also come with open hearts, trained to personally care for people suffering an emotional crisis.
To let the client know that they're not alone, that I'm just the first person they're going to meet, that I have a great team behind me, and that includes disaster mental health, disaster health services, and spiritual aid.
Why did Roy and Chip become volunteers? Both say that the Red Cross mission statement highlights the path of helping others that they both want to travel.
You're able to make a big impact on people, help them prepare for and respond to natural disasters.
We're going to alleviate human suffering through the power of donations and through volunteer services.
That is the real helping power of the Red Cross, measured one dedicated volunteer at a time. I'm Randy Yohe for the Legislature Today.
Tomorrow on the Legislature Today, Day 59 promises to be a long one with split sessions here at the Capitol as the clock is ticking on several major bills. We'll have an update on those and the budget in our Friday Reporters Roundtable. I'm Suzanne Higgins. For everyone here at West Virginia Public Broadcasting, thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.